Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to dive right in and unpack the incredibly dense 4,000-year history of a single city that has, quite literally, shaped the entire world.
Okay, let's tackle this irony right out of the gate. According to tradition, this place was originally named the City of Peace by a prophet's son. But as we all know, historically, it seemed pretty much everything but peace. So why is that?
Well, it really comes down to this. We're talking about a tiny patch of land that holds the absolute holiest sites for three of the world's major religions. You've got the Western Wall for Judaism, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for Christianity, and the Al-Aqsa compound for Islam. It's basically the ultimate geographical focal point of faith for billions of people.
To make sense of over 4 millennia of history, we're breaking this explainer down into 6 distinct eras: the paradox of peace, the era of prophets and kings, destruction and Roman conquest, the march towards Jerusalem, a historic peaceful conquest, and finally, silence after the conquest.
All right, jumping right into Section 2, the era of prophets and kings.
So this story actually kicks off with ancient patriarchs moving into the region. Prophet Abraham survives a fire in Ur, and eventually his descendants migrate to Egypt during a massive famine. But fast forward a bit, and we hit a really crucial number, 400. You see, after initially gaining incredible power and wealth in Egypt, the Israelites were suddenly seen as a threat. The ruling pharaohs stripped them of their wealth, and they endured an agonizing 400 years of brutal slavery. 4 centuries.
Then comes a huge turning point. Prophet Musa or Moses rescues his people, reportedly around 600,000 of them, and leads them out of Egypt. But as they get close to their ancestral land, they see the powerful Amalekites, and honestly, they're terrified. They flat out refuse to fight. And because of that refusal, they end up wandering the desert for 40 years. Why 40 years? Well, it was so an entirely new generation could be born, a generation completely free from the psychological chains of that 400-year slavery.
Now, check out this number. 9. 9 feet. That's the estimated height of Jalut, who you might know as Goliath. The Israelites, who are now a free people, have to face this absolutely terrifying opponent. But in one of the most famous underdog stories ever, he's defeated by a single, well-aimed stone from a brave young boy named Prophet Dawood, or David. It's a legendary moment that literally changed the course of history. That victory established a powerful, united kingdom. And later, his son, Suleiman, or Solomon, builds this legendary temple in Jerusalem. This temple wasn't just a place for worship, you know. It acted like a spiritual and political parliament. But unfortunately, this golden era doesn't last. The kingdom tragically shatters. The tribes divide, they fall into civil conflict, and their defenses are severely weakened.
Which brings us to Section 3, Destruction and Roman Conquest.
This era is just defined by immense devastation. It starts with the Babylonians sweeping in, burning Solomon's magnificent temple right to the ground, and tragically enslaving the population all over again. But then, 50 years later, you have Cyrus the Great of the Persian Empire acting as a liberator. He actually frees the Israelites and even funds the rebuilding of their temple. But skip ahead about 500 years, and the mighty Roman Empire shows up. Unlike Cyrus, the Romans brutally crush any uprisings, completely destroy the city again, and eventually ban Jews from even setting foot in it.
Right in the middle of all this intense Roman rule, Prophet Isa, or Jesus, arrives with his message. As you can imagine, religious and political tensions are boiling over, and it culminates in a plot to end his life. Now, while Islamic sources maintain he actually survived and another was crucified in his place, the aftermath was the same, a massive Roman crackdown. Eventually, the whole Roman Empire adopts Christianity, and they strictly enforce that 600-year ban preventing Jews from entering the Holy City.
Moving right along to Section 4, the March towards Jerusalem.
Okay, the entire global balance of power is about to be rewritten by an unexpected force coming straight out of the harsh Arabian desert. And watch how fast this happens. In 614 AD, the Persians conquer Jerusalem and take the Holy Cross. Barely 14 years later, the Romans violently defeat the Persians and take it back. These two massive superpowers just absolutely exhaust each other in these brutal, endless wars. And what does that do? It leaves a massive power vacuum. This allows the newly united, rapidly expanding Islamic forces to sweep in and peacefully encircle Jerusalem by 637 AD.
Now, the Muslim forces intentionally avoided a military assault. They wanted to prevent bloodshed in the Holy City. But the truly unique part of the story is the reaction of the city's leader, priest Sophronius. He knows Jerusalem's tragic history of being repeatedly burned and sacked, right? So he flat out refuses to surrender to any standard general. Instead, he makes this unprecedented demand. He will only surrender the city if the Muslim ruler, Caliph Umar ibn Khattab, comes in person. Umar's reputation for profound simplicity and justice had already spread like wildfire.
And that brings us to Section 5, a historic, peaceful conquest. This is the moment that completely breaks that vicious cycle of violence we've been tracking for 4 millennia. 1,400 kilometers. That's the distance Caliph Umar traveled from Medina to Jerusalem. And get this, he didn't march in with a massive golden carriage or a royal guard. No way. He made this exhausting month-long journey with just a single camel and basic provisions. It's an unbelievable display of humility for a guy who was, at that very moment, arguably the most powerful ruler on the planet.
Now, I do have to point out a super fascinating historical detail here. You might have heard the famous legend that Umar took turns riding the camel with his servant, and that the servant was actually the one riding when they entered the city. Well, historical analysis tells us that specific story is actually an unauthenticated myth. But what is completely factual is that his arrival in patched, incredibly simple clothes absolutely shocked the onlookers. They were totally used to royal extravagance.
Just look at this stark contrast. Previous conquerors brought fire, the sword, and mass enslavement. Caliph Umar? When he arrived, he actually threw pebbles at his own top generals. He was furious that they had abandoned their modest roots and were strutting around in fancy, luxurious Roman garments. He demanded they remember the humility that got them there in the first place.
And his leadership is perfectly illustrated by the Amanama. This was a revolutionary treaty of tolerance. It guaranteed the safety of Christian lives and their churches, and it strictly outlawed forced conversions. On top of that, it lifted that 600-year Roman ban on Jews. He brilliantly allowed Jewish visitation without permanent residence, which was a very careful way to manage the delicate religious balance of the city and avoid immediate friction with the Christians.
His respect for the city's holy sites was just absolute. When the time for prayer came while he was inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Umar actually stepped outside to pray. Why? Because he was afraid that if he prayed inside, future Muslims might use it as an excuse to convert the church into a mosque. Later, when he found the Jewish holy site Beit al-Maqdis covered in garbage left by the Romans, the Caliph of the Islamic Empire literally got down on his knees and cleaned it with his bare hands. And to cap off this historic day, Bilal gave his first call to prayer since the Prophet's passing. It moved everyone present to tears.
And that brings us to our final section, silence after the conquest.
So the incredible joy of this bloodless historic conquest was, unfortunately, followed by a profound and sudden tragedy. You see, years earlier, the Prophet Muhammad had shockingly predicted this exact sequence of events to his companions. He foresaw his own death, followed by the successful conquest of Jerusalem, and then, ominously, a massive, deadly disease that would sweep through the ranks of the believers.
And exactly as predicted, a sudden, devastating plague swept through the region, completely silencing the victorious armies. This plague claimed multitudes of lives, including the legendary generals who had literally just built the empire. Titans like Abu Ubaidah and the undefeated Khalid bin Walid. This immense loss completely reset the leadership landscape of the region, and it paved the way for a whole new generation of leaders to step into power.
So, we'll leave you with this to ponder. If a historically war-torn city, a place fiercely contested for 4,000 years, could achieve a completely bloodless transition of power through sheer humility, tolerance, and mutual respect, what does that teach us about the true nature of power today? If true peace was achieved not by the sword, but by a man in patched clothes who swept the floors of his predecessors, what does that mean for how we view leadership in our modern world? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable explainer with us.